and then the question is who is going to answer.
I think I'm not suited, so maybe it's just you and Samo. So maybe I will put the question first. So the question was, if you freeze the beans and grind them directly after taking it out of the freezer, the moisture percentage is higher than normally, right? How is that helping with the sweetness? I mean, I did freeze and got sweeter, but I don't know why and how. So it's a question about sweetness and freezing.
Right. I can answer about the freezing. Yes, if you ground frozen beans, then they will have higher moisture content because they're cold and the water from air will condense on the beans. So yes, you'll have this. Regards to sweetness, it's a big question. What is sweetness in coffee? It's actually not known, right? Sure. Scientifically, there's not really a lot of publications which would deal with sweetness in coffee. So we know that it's not really sugar because the sugar breaks down during roasting. It's not like a sucrose or glucose or something simple as that. The bigger sugars that are in coffee, they tend to not be very sweet. So the sweetness here is, perception, I guess.
The perceived
sweetness, yeah.
It is true. I have tried the same, and I find when you take out the beans straight off the deep freezer, put them into the grinder, and then brew the coffee, there is a tendency towards more sweetness and like a more creamy body. And even the finish, I would say, is long-lasting, velvety, and really you perceive more sweetness. So that's a typical question from the barista world, because especially for championships, people will be freezing the beans.
Just to say what is going on in the background when you're grinding frozen coffee, there's two things. First, you're grinding cold. So it means that everything that you lose normally during grinding will much more stay in the grounds. So you will retain more aroma, more CO2 in the coffee. But then because you get moisture after grinding, you will kind of speed up a bit because there's one publication that was published some time ago where they found that coffee with higher moisture led to to faster release of aroma from coffee. So you're losing aroma faster. But it's kind of, I think the temperature effect is much stronger than the moisture effect. So you are, in the end, retaining much more of those highly volatile aroma, which you normally lose. And this CO2, you said creaminess, perhaps more CO2 plays a role there. And also maybe this highly volatile aroma that you often lose a lot when you grind, you retain it more. And because of this, maybe the coffee is perceived as sweeter.
Okay.
That sounds good. So how about we go on? The next question was, during a cupping, why the ground coffee smells different than the bowl after having broken the crust? Also, when the cupping bowl is cooling down, why the aromatic profile is different? I think that's perfect for you, Andre, huh?
Oh, are you sure? I think Samo can maybe give us some background on the volatiles and when we have like more of them. But then I can talk a little bit from my experience during cupping. But it is true. So on the SCA cupping form, we will first have to smell the coffee ground. So when the coffee just comes out of the grinder without being in contact with water. So we quickly check this. Then we will add the water. Then we will smell on top of the crust. And then we will break this crust. And what we can also see, the moment we break this crust is also the right moment where you get a lot of aromas into the nose. And from my point of view, I think this is because you break the crust, and that's the moment where a lot of volatiles will be released. And then during the cupping, it's true, we are supposed to cup coffee at 3 different temperatures: hot, then a little bit chilled down, and then more or less ambient. And you can definitely feel how the aromas and also then the flavors are changing over time. Also, taste will change.
I have a question. Maybe this is going to you, Sam, already, and it's going hand in hand with the crust. Do you think it's similar with the crema on espresso? Is it also some kind of like crust as in a cupping bowl?
I think so. Yes, the crema acts as some barrier to the volatiles. Yeah.
So even like if you protective
kind
layer?
of steer the espresso on the bottom, you mix everything, but the crema is kind of a bit more. It's not so fluid. It stays stiff on the top, so you're not really agitating as much, for example. So it is, yes. The crust probably works the same way. Yeah, but there's the basic phenomenon, as Andre already said, but he wanted to give me to answer, is that the amount of aroma that comes out from the grounds is much higher than what you get from the brew, and that is one of the main reasons why grounds smell different than the brew. So the first is, the release from grounds is very fast, but once you trap the aroma in a brew, with the surface area of the brew is just the top of the brew, so it only can release from there. Whereas from the grounds, they have a large surface area. You release the aroma very quickly. The second thing is that also that how fast aroma escapes, because if we want to know what we're smelling, we want to know what escaped from the coffee, right? So aroma of different properties, different chemistries, they can escape with different rates from ground coffee as opposed to from brew. Because when we talk about smelling aroma from ground coffee, the aroma needs to go from the particle to the air around, and then we smell this air. So aroma from the air, we smell it. And when we have brew, the aroma goes from the particle into the brew, so the extraction, plus then it has to go from the brew to the air, and then we smell it. So it's a different process. So this partitioning between the brew and the air can be very different than from the coffee particles, so ground coffee and air.
Super interesting. Then I will go on with maybe an easier question. What is the highest caffeine content measured in Calliphora, also known as Robusta coffee? And are there Calliphora varietals which are higher than having a higher caffeine content than average? So maybe I will start with answering this question. Maybe you have something to add here. So there is a different kind of pathway in Robusta versus Arabica on how caffeine is stored during the ripening of the coffee cherries, coffee beans. For Robusta, it's more so there's two gene expressions which make Robusta storing the caffeine more in the beans, whereas Arabica is stored more in the leaves. And this leads to Robusta coffees having an average up to 2 to 3 times more caffeine than Arabica. And with the highest caffeine content, to my knowledge, is like 3.2% caffeine, which is like Arabica is around 1.5% caffeine content. And if you know more varietals, like which having higher caffeine contents, add please.
Samo, is there anything you're going to add from your side, or?
No, I think that's pretty much the range of the caffeine usually seen in coffees, right?
Yeah.
From 1 to 3%. There's one. What's do you remember what's the variety, Sara, of the Arabica that is low on caffeine?
Yes, this is what I wanted to mention quickly. So there is Laurinia, or also called Bourbon Pointu. So this was also the variety that has been chosen by the World Barista Champion in 2018, right? When Emmy won in Brazil. And it said that this variety has only half of the caffeine content compared to an average Arabica bean.
And so we would assume this is about 0.5% then. around.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, could be around there. I'm not sure about the precise amount because you're a scientist, so I'm better silent. But you can taste it's beautifully sweet and definitely less bitter. Can that be because of the lower caffeine content?
Yeah, can be. So caffeine is actually just attributing like 10 to 15% of the overall bitterness, but still like 15% bitterness of the overall bitterness. And if you halve the caffeine content, you will also lower the bitterness, the perceived bitterness. Yeah.
Okay. And perhaps this coffee was very light roasted, so maybe caffeine was more significant than normal coffees, where you say 10-15% is probably more a darker roast. In a lighter roast, I'm not sure. It would be very interesting to know if there's any studies around.
So
what is the bitterness in lighter roasted coffees?
There's a study around, for example, caffeine degradation, like thermal degradation during roasting, and it's pretty much staying the same. So caffeine is very temperature stable. But what lighter roasts are like, where lighter roasts are different to darker roasts, it's like the bitter compounds form during the roasting. So you will not just have like caffeine plus all the bitterness compounds, but like more on the caffeine side because the other bitter compounds are not yet formed because it's a light roast. So yeah, the caffeine will have a bigger share in the bitterness in a light roast coffee. So this makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Okay. And maybe to clarify, so when we talk about the championships, generally speaking, those will be lighter roasts. So there cannot be compared to like, let's say, commercial coffee, which are mostly roasted towards a darker color. Because we want to highlight all the fruity notes or even the floral notes. So we try to not roast them too dark for competition.